Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today I'm here with Ron LeMay of Main Street Data. Ron, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's good to be with you.
Great. Thanks. So what was your background before joining Main Street Data?
So I spent most of my career in the communications business. I was an officer at Southwestern Bell, AT&T, and at Sprint, and retired from Sprint in 2003 as president and chief operating officer. So my background was largely communications, although for a brief time I ran waste management in Oak Brook, Illinois. So I've done a lot of different things. But I joined Main Street Data because it's a portfolio company of OpenAir Equity Partners. I formed OpenAir Equity Partners along with my son in 1999 to provide a place to work for me when I retired, because I knew I would never have the ability to or interest in retiring. And so we invested in the predecessor to Main Street Data, and that's how I got here.
Well, that's great. So you're working in a new space, fintech and ag. What would you tell investors in that space to think about before they write that first check?
Look at it very carefully. There's a lot of activity in ag now. It was a really sleepy ecosystem when we first invested in it. It's not any longer. I think this is really healthy for everyone, but it is an area now that is full of new business models, full of new technology, full of disruptors. And so it's the kind of area that is rich with opportunity, but it requires deep due diligence to really understand the space and how it relates to the needs of the market and how it fits competitively.
Well, great. Well, it seems like it's moving very fast these days. So how do you see the industry evolving going forward?
I think throughout the industry, there are going to be lots of winners and losers. So I see this as similar to the communications market when competition was introduced back in the 80s. I see it as similar to the financial markets as deregulation occurred. So that a lot of money has been invested in various aspects of this. There's a struggle between incumbents and challengers. So it's a really interesting market, but it's a market in which, as I said before, one needs to be very careful to understand the facts and diligence whatever the proposition is. There's a lot of data available, but a lot of the data is not actionable data. So there are pitfalls in this, just like there are in other markets, and one needs to be careful and attentive.
That's great. So it seemed like the sector is growing fast, but how fast is it growing?
I don't think anyone can measure how fast it's growing because there are billions of dollars being invested in it. Adoption has been very slow in parts of the market. A lot of this is by private companies or at levels that don't require reporting externally. And so it's really hard to gauge it and quantify it. But I can tell you this, it's going to be a very rapidly growing market, at least parts of this, the parts that we're targeting and have identified and developed products for are going to grow very rapidly because there's a crying need for companies of all kinds to get better at a step function rate. But this is not a place where slow incremental continuous improvement is going to work. And so if companies have tools that actually help companies make much better decisions than they can make without them, then they're going to be attractive and they're going to grow rapidly.
So how many companies are engaged in the space? It's quite a large amount of funding going on, so it sounds like there's quite a few.
There are quite a few, but it's a big space. And so there's companies that have invested in robots and sensors and drones and all kinds of seed technology, new chemical technologies, farm management plans, system plans. So we have chosen to invest in a narrow slice of this, but to invest very deeply in it because we think it offers the opportunity for the fastest growth.
So what are the challenges in this space? regulatory, market, technology, or otherwise?
There really aren't, in the space that we are entering, any regulatory challenges. In other parts of the space, there are regulatory challenges, but they're not in the places that we've identified. We've collected an enormous amount of data over the past number of years, almost a decade now, and weather data going back to 2000, so about 20 years of weather data. So the challenge is evidenced by the experience we had in it. If one aspires to apply data science to decision making in agriculture, we're doing this in the B2B space, so we don't address the grower. There are a lot of entries who have been heavily backed that are directly addressing the grower. Growers have been so slow to adopt. The cost of sale and the cost of care is higher than we're willing to tolerate. And so we're addressing lenders, crop insurance, traders, and retailers. And the challenge there is getting enough high quality data to actually be able to apply data science in a way that improves decision making. Well, we actually have spent over $80 million collecting the data set we have, but we have the highest quality and largest yield data set for corn, wheat, and soybeans in the country. That's the foundation for our business. And the challenge is to accumulate a data set like that that's adequate to answer the questions you want to answer. So that has been our challenge, but we surmounted that challenge. We now have that data set, and we've developed products for each of the segments we intend to pursue.
Well, tell us more about the Main Street Data Company itself. What products are you working on today?
So Main Street Data arose out of an initial investment we made in the year 2000. We created a company called Machinery Link, and the objective of Machinery Link was to address the asset utilization problem in agriculture. At that time, combines, which were the most expensive of the agricultural equipment at the time, were used 7% of the time and were idle 93% of the time. Tractors were idle 87% of the time. And so we created a combine fleet to share the fleet among growers by moving the fleet around the country as the crops matured in different areas. Difficulty was weather always interceded and prevented us from getting to enough use to make money. So in 2010, we converted the fleet into a data collection platform. We created our own dongle to install into the CAN bus of the combine to extract codes that we wanted. We put an antenna on the combine. We put a wireless modem on the combine so we could monitor things. And we set about to collect data. At OpenAir Equity Partners, which is the investment firm we founded in Kansas City, we are IoT investors, Internet of Things investors. And so it was natural to us to believe we could collect data from this combine fleet and monetize it in some appropriate way. But we ramped up to, I think we were probably the largest operator of farming equipment in the country for a time. We had a fleet of 350 combines we were moving around, but we could not get enough utilization, as I indicated. And so as we converted it to a data collection platform, we began to pay a lot of attention to the quality of the data we were collecting and determined that that quality was limited and was not really actionable because we were collecting data in a hostile environment. The fields are hot and muddy, wet, dry, etc. But also growers generally do not calibrate their combines. And without that calibration, the data that's collected by yield monitors is not accurate. And so we address that problem by spending a lot of money with techs going to growers before they would run the combine, doing a 300-point checklist inspection. And we would calibrate the combine, and we then would monitor for calibration changes. As a consequence of that, we now have a data set, the high quality data set across 7 years, 26 states, with 1.3 billion samples of yield, 30 billion data elements that represent surrounding uncontrollable variables like soil type, erosion, slope, and all kinds of weather elements. We've married that up with a weather data set that has 4.2 trillion data elements that matches up the weather to those 1.3 billion yield samples. And so we believe we know more about the effect of weather on yield than anyone does. And as a result of that, we've developed products that help growers understand how they perform relative to others under comparable conditions. We're doing that through retailers now as opposed to directly with the growers. We have all kinds of forecasting tools. So we forecast at a hyper local level for cooperatives, ethanol plants, feedlots, railroads, to let them know what production is in their natural market area so they're not surprised. Railroads have enough cars, not too many cars. Elevators know when to sell grain and what price to sell grain. So there are all kinds of uses for the forecasting at the hyper-local level. We also have a grain marketing tool for growers that we distribute through cooperatives that help growers improve their grain marketing. When we do direct market research with growers, the one thing they say they do poorest is market grain. And so we solve that with a product we call Market Vision. And then we have a revolutionary product for grain traders called Progressive Weather Yield, which provides national, all states that grow corn and soybeans and all counties in those states forecasts twice a day. So while most traders are waiting for the USDA to release their forecast, which they release once a month when the growing season gets underway, we're providing an enormous amount, a couple of thousand forecasts per day, because it's for each of the counties, and all kinds of supporting material that help them understand why the forecast. So it creates a huge advantage for traders in the futures market.
Well, it sounds like a very robust data set and a rich set of products to help the community. What else should we cover in the last few minutes here that we haven't already?
I'm not sure there's anything else. I think with that answer, I pretty much addressed what I wanted to communicate. So unless you have another question, I don't think there's anything else.
Well, that's great. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Ron at OpenAirEquityPartners.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. But Ron at OpenAir Equity Partners or OpenAirEP.com is probably the best way. I'm on email all the time.
Well, great. We'll put those in the show notes for anybody that wants to get back in touch with you. Appreciate your taking time today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.